Welcome back to KCDC. Joining me now is Democratic Congresswoman Karen Bass of California. She is also chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Also with me, former Republican Congressman Tom Coleman. Thank you both for being here tonight. Congresswoman Bass, let me start with you because, quite frankly, I'd like to hear your response to what has happened in El Paso in particular with this, essay screed we have seen from the shooter now in custody, referencing a Hispanic invasion, a lot of other comments that are racist, deeply offensive. Do you think the president and his rhetoric bear some responsibility for this event, considering that?
Absolutely. I mean, if you read the quote-unquote manifesto, it reads like a script from a Trump rally. I mean, Trump was very clear when he came down the escalator. What was his first speech about? Attacking Mexicans. He has called repeatedly against an invasion at our border. I absolutely think his rhetoric was a contributing factor, and I feel sad that my Republican colleagues have not spoken up at all.
What is the view from inside the Democratic caucus right now, Congresswoman, about what to do next? I know there's a call tomorrow with all of your members at noon. There have been calls for Congress to come back to emergency session. Obviously, the House has already passed a pair of gun violence-related bills. So what now? I mean, what action can the House take to try and do something in the wake of these tragedies?
Well, I think we need to look at white supremacy. We need to look at white nationalism. Now, I will tell you that in Judiciary, we have had a hearing on that. I know a couple of other committees have too. But we need to get the Republicans to admit that it actually exists, because they are in complete denial. They will not even accept a discussion around the issue. In fact, they brought African-American witnesses who essentially said that the white supremacy was in the Democratic Party, which means that they didn't even take the topic seriously. But we need to look at domestic terrorism. We need to look at what we need to do in order to prevent this, because it's very hard to address a problem if you will not even if you will not even admit that the problem exists.
Congressman Coleman, it's been a little while since you were a member of the House of Representatives, but you did serve as a Republican. Do you recognize this Republican Party and the rhetoric that this president has put out there and that has, found itself reflected in the manifesto?
Well, I certainly recognize it. I don't agree with it. And kind of paraphrasing Ronald Reagan, he didn't leave the Democratic Party left him. The reverse for me. The Republican Party left me. I think Karen is absolutely right in what she's saying there. It's disappointing. I mean, 50 years ago, when I decided as a young person to enter politics, I chose the Republican Party because in my home state of Missouri, it was the Reform Party. And that state now has turned completely opposite of what it was. It was all Democrats, and then a few of us got elected. Now it's all Republican. The whole party has changed in the sense that they don't want a big tent. Trump has commandeered the party. He's taken it over. It was, it was done in the 2016 election. And it's no longer the party of Republicans that I know. And a lot of people, I think, unfortunately, see that R or the Republican name and think it's the same party. And it's certainly not. Donald Trump is not the old Republican Party.
So from what we can tell, this is still one of the only statements from Republicans calling out this attack as white nationalists, although we do have a tweet from Ted Cruz talking about the bigotry towards Hispanics. This is from George P. Bush. And he wrote, "I proudly served in Afghanistan as a naval officer when our mission was to fight and kill terrorists. I believe fighting terrorism remains a national priority, and that should include standing firm against white terrorism here in the United States." He goes on to say, "This is a real present threat we must all denounce and defeat. I'm praying for the victims of the shooting in El Paso, and I'm asking that all Americans stand firm against all forms of terrorism." And he uses that phrase, white terrorism. Why is it that George P. Bush is so alone in using this language in the Republican Party?
Well, first of all, he's in Texas, and it's going to impact his political career and life.
Right.
He's also the grandson of Herbert Walker Bush, who I was very close to. And I think if he were alive today, he would be coming out with the same statement.
Congresswoman Bass, let me ask you about, you know, we were having a much different conversation about race last week, the week before that, with the president's racist tweet about the squad, with his comments about Baltimore. You, I know, were just on a trip to Ghana with our top leaders, with Nancy Pelosi. There was a picture that Ilhan Omar posted of herself with Pelosi that really stuck out in my mind. What was that trip like for you, and what were some of the questions you got about the climate here in the United States from foreign leaders abroad?
Well, first of all, it was a wonderful trip. It was an incredible honor to be there with Speaker Pelosi and 13 members of the Congressional Black Caucus. You know, this is the anniversary, the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the first Africans on the continent, you know, in the United States. And so we wanted to go back to the origins of slavery. And so we visited the dungeons where our ancestors were held for months before they were put on ships in the transatlantic slave trade. We also had the opportunity to watch the Speaker address Parliament. So people on the continent, and I travel to the continent frequently, they are looking at the United States completely puzzled, because people viewed the United States as the rock, the solid, you know, light, and now they're confused, especially because remember what the president had to say about the African countries. I took the opportunity when he made that derogatory statement to go to the African Union, which is located in Georgetown, and all 50+ ambassadors are there, and I apologized on behalf of the American people, because I think it's very important that we are honest with people internationally, and that we distance ourselves. I think it's very sad. Let me just say one other thing, too, is that whenever there is a situation of domestic terrorism, and we know that the majority of the time the individual is a white male, then my Republican colleagues always want to talk about mental health. O'Malley said today that white supremacists, or people who are white nationalists, that's a mental illness. Now, if the person is of Middle Eastern origin, then of course they're just a straight terrorist. But my Republican colleagues who always want to talk about mental illness, when it comes down to it, they won't put any resources there. So they want to say it's a mental health issue, and at the same time, they're trying to destroy the Affordable Care Act. So it's filled with contradictions, and I hope that the representative that is there with you, maybe he can organize other Republicans and they can take their party back, because now it's been taken over by extremists.
Congresswoman Karen Bass with a mission for Congressman Tom Coleman. Thank you both very much for your time tonight.